Hey, I'm Cruz from Twinsies, and I play the keyboards, play the guitar. Sometimes there's a microphone here, and I'll just be saying some dumb stuff on the mic to get people excited about the show. But I wanted to walk through some of the equipment that I use. This is my guitar. As you can tell, this is not a Gibson, it's a Greco. And for those that don't know, in the 70s, there was a lot of, they call them the lawsuit era guitars, but in Japan and probably across the world, but I know that in Japan, they were making a lot of really high quality replicas of American brands like Fender and Gibson. And they made stuff that was so good that was threatening the American guitar manufacturers, like their share of the market. And they started suing them and said like, hey, stop, like your guitars are too sick. But what's great is that now this is a guitar that's vintage and sounds and plays just like an original Gibson or Fender, but I can get at so much of a more affordable price, something that's like within my price range and not like a $20,000 like 1959 gold top Les Paul that only like a doctor or a lawyer can afford. But I love this guitar. It has such a great sound. Let me take some of these effects off. But this is the clean sound in the in-between position, which I use a lot because it's a little bit cleaner, a little twangier. I'm more of a single coil kind of guy, but what's great about these guitars is that they have almost a single coil type quality, but it kills the hum. And this is the neck position. It's very warm. And then if you're trying to rock, we got the bridge position, which is really good for like if you use a little bit of overdrive. Then you can smooth it out. Yeah, so this has been very recently my main guitar, but I try not to take it on tour because it's a hollow body. So it's a little fragile and it's already been broken once, so I don't want for it to break again. So what I've been using on tour whenever I have to do more intense traveling is I've been using another Japanese lawsuit era guitar. This is a early 70s Greco Strat. They called it the Greco Super Sounds. Brazen, picker, professional, handcrafted, special made. But you know, it's a nice heavy guitar, just like 70s Gibsons, 70s Fender Strats were. And honestly, it's built like a tank, heavy duty, no issues. Like I've been beating it up a ton and you don't even see the stuff. It probably has such a thick coat of lacquer, but it's been very faithful to me. Zero issues. And the cool thing about these is that if something were to happen, if I were to drop it and the neck were to break, you can just swap out the neck. And I wouldn't be able to do the same with that guitar, so I'm a little bit more precious with that one, but this is my Road Warrior right here. And it's also a super versatile guitar. This is like my preferred kind of sounds are these like single coil type vibes where like these in-between positions are really fun for like funky stuff. Or if you want like a warmer, like smanky sound. Or what I like to do is use the neck position for a lot of like the melodies. Or if I'm using like some overdrive. Yeah, I love this guitar. It's super, super versatile. I mainly stick to these like 3 positions, but you still have these good like middle position. And then sometimes for leads, I'll use that bridge position, but I tend to mostly like stay on these clean, spanky. I like to say more of the keyboardist of Twinsies, because Eddie does a really good job on the guitar and he covers a lot of the stuff that I don't have to do. Because of that, I can focus on more playing keys, and then I'll do some kind of melodies sometimes to fill in the sound. But this is my setup. I've been using this forever. It's the Nord Stage 3 Compact, which is great. It's a much more compact size. They have like the bigger ones with the heavy action and stuff, very like piano, like heavy action. But for me, I'm not a trained pianist, so I get tired using those heavy actions. So this is kind of perfect. It's very similar to like a Rhodes type action, and I'll use this for a lot of like more of the natural sounds like Rhodes and organs, for example, like and that stuff you can't replicate with a synthesizer. So it's good to have like a keyboard that can do those kinds of sounds. Or like right here with this green light, it demonstrates like a split, so I can have on my right side like an organ type of sound. And what's cool is that it has a bunch of effects. Like you can put delays and amp simulators and distortion and reverb and get like a real cool sound. But you take all this stuff off. So you got your clean stuff and then put it on. Make it much more of an interesting sound. Then sometimes I'll use it for like synths and stuff, like samples. I can use it for like strings kind of things, or some synthesizers. Which the way I like to treat it is I like to use this one for more like rhythm chords and stuff that I'll do with my left hand. And then with my right hand, I tend to use this top keyboard, which is the Oberheim OB6, which I'm a huge fan of because it's an all analog synthesizer, but it has presets and you can switch it between monophonic and polyphonic. So it's great for like, if you want to do like some chords, you can take it out of unison. Or you want to do it for leads, put on portamento unison. Do it. And one of my favorite things about this keyboard is that it has aftertouch, which not a lot of analog synthesizers do. Maybe some of the newer ones, but classic analog synthesizers from back in the day didn't have aftertouch. So to do those kind of modulations, you'd have to like play and then use the mod wheel. But what's cool about this keyboard is it has aftertouch, so I could do this. And as I apply pressure, it'll add modulation, which is great if you're doing like two-handed stuff, which I'm doing a lot, where I can do a chord. And so it kind of makes it so I could do more, because a big thing with Twin Seas is originally it was just a 4-piece. Now we have Jake and we're a 5-piece and he helps a ton. But for the longest time, I had to do all the keyboard duties. So I had to do as much as I could with just 2 hands. So just having aftertouch made it so I could free up my left hand to do rhythm stuff. And this thing has so many great presets that I use. Like I'll tend to use this one as my main like lead, which will be like a slightly detuned unison type lead sound, which sounds like this. Or if I want something with some sustain, I'll use number 7. Which is great. So if I need something that sustains a little bit, especially if I'm like switching, the sound doesn't die right away instead of when I use this one, which is very like staccato, which is good for like funky kind of stuff. Or, which it's just kind of whatever you choose. Sometimes I'll use this one for like surf wave, which is cool, like little trumpet sounds. Or sometimes I'll use this one, which is kind of like a string. For when you want to do, 80s rock en español covers. But I love this keyboard. It's been really like my favorite thing to use. It makes things really easy because when you only have one keyboard, you have to do like a lot of splits and stuff. But having a second keyboard really helps because you're able to just play with one sound here, have a split here, and then do leads. And you can On one of the songs, Out of Time, that I'll demonstrate, I'm doing like a lot of like switching, and I could only do it if I had 2 keyboards. So Out of Time is a song from our second record, and that's when I took synthesizers a little bit more serious and wanted to get more into like tones and like trying to be funky. And this was my first foray into that. And part of that was like layering a lot of like Moog synthesizers over each other with a lot of melodies, but playing it live was a whole nother beast, and I ended up having to do a lot of really intense programming to make this happen. For example, I was using this for like the leads, but I needed to do some kind of harmonies, and you can't do chords, so I ended up having to program another lead here to do the harmonies. So it's like, then have this set for like chords, and some samples in here that to kind of like fill out the sound, like that's just like some sound effects. Right here is like some more, or there's some more sound effects in there. Just because at the time I didn't have a second keyboardist. We have Jake now, so he adds a bunch of cool sound effects and stuff, but this was my way to kind of cheat it. So I would, or put chords here so I could do like leads. The next thing I wanted to walk through is my pedal board. So every great pedal board has to have a tuner. If you don't have a tuner, you're already messed up. Buy yourself a tuner. No one likes to hear your guitar be out of tune. No one wants to hear you tuning it with an iPhone app. Like, get a tuner so you can silently tune. The next thing in this chain was a recommendation from Eddie, which was this noise gate. I think it was on Amazon. It must have been like $25, and just kills that noise. I don't even know the brand of this. Rowan. Just look up noise gate on Amazon, you'll find it. The next pedal is this one called the SP compressor by Exotic. And I love this because it has a similar type of vibe as the MkII Dynacomp, and it helps me a lot when I'm playing guitar, and it'll help even out my rhythm and my lead playing. So for example, that is a chord, and that is a melody, and they sound almost perfectly balanced. Like, it makes it really easy for me because I don't have to think about, is my volume at a good position? I can just go. The next thing in my chain is this BB Plus, which I'm a huge fan of. It is a Marshall like style overdrive, but what's cool about it is it's 2 boxes in one. The right side, which is these 2 knobs and these little mini knobs, is what I use for like overdrive. So if I have it off, it'll be my clean sound. Turn it on. Which is honestly, I would say, is on about 95% of the show. I have it on because Eddie's also using a lot of really cool clean tones, and sometimes he'll be using a Strat. So to kind of differentiate our sound, instead of both of us playing with this clean Fendery kind of sound, I'll have mine engaged, my overdrive, so that way my tone kind of sits in a different place. And then this other side right here is basically another one of these pedals, but with the settings dialed in very differently. I'll have more gain and the volume a little bit lower, and it feeds into this side. So I'll use it for my leads and it'll sound something like this. Which I'll use for songs like As Expected. The next thing I have, which is another pedal I tend to have all the time, is this ultra vibrato from Behringer. I was turned on to this by my friend Misha from Sad Girl. He's been using these for a long time for just to get that little bit of warble and kind of have it on all the time, which is this setting. I have like the rate kind of like a slower rate and then the depth kind of in the middle. If I were to have it off, it sounds like this, which is not a bad sound, but I like to have it on all the time. So it's another layer of differentiation between my tone and Eddie's tone. But you can get real wacky with it. You can do something like, you know, which is cool for like, you know, that kind of stuff. But I like to have it in a more conservative setting. Just leave it on all the time. That will go into this pedal, which is the Strymon Mobius. I love this because it's a good like catch-all multi-effects pedal. I tend to have it in the setting which I labeled Cruisin', which is kind of like an auto wah setting. And if I use it with the overdrive, which is a really fun like envelope kind of thing. I'm a big fan of like Japanese funk, and they use envelope filters all over that, especially like Masayoshi Takanaka. He's a huge inspiration. He has a bunch of really cool songs where he uses the envelope filter for like either like rhythm kind of stuff, like, or for like, actually uses more for like leads. So I like to emulate some of his, and you know, you always gotta stay inspired and pick up stuff where you can, and that kind of helps you build your own personal sound because you're using your own tastes. But sometimes I'll use this. You can go right here to switch to banks and use something like a phaser. Yeah, overall fun pedal. This right here is the classic, infamous Boss CE2 Chorus. This was actually one of the first pedals I've ever bought in my life, and yeah, it just has such a lush chorus. Yeah, I'm a big fan of like Johnny Marr and all those like 80s guitar players like Robert Smith and stuff, so you gotta have some chorus. And I end my chain with this guy, which is the Capistan from Strymon. And what's cool about this one is it has your tape delays, which is very, very fun. And I like to hold this one and get like kind of like that feedback kind of stuff. It's really good for like transition. Sometimes I'll do it with my foot. There it goes. And it's cool because then it'll set up a transition. So I'm a fan of that. And sometimes if you have a sound that's too wacky, I got this pedal that kind of just resets it. To finish up the chain, I got this UAD Dream pedal. And it's basically a Fender in a box with a cab loader, like an IR simulator. So I don't tend to use it too often because a lot of times I get to use an amp. But if I ever need to like fly and use a DI, I'll switch this cable, which is my output, and go into the output of that. And then I have an amp. And the last thing on my chain is this amp. This is a Yamaha, I believe G50 112 Mark II, which is very similar to the one that Eddie has. I believe Eddie's using the Mark I, which has a little bit less knobs. But what I love about this one is that it has 2 channels, which you can switch between here and here. And a really cool thing about that is that sometimes we'll be on tour, like we were on tour with this band from Tijuana called Ramona. and their guitar player, Guicho, him and I were sharing this amp. And what was really cool is that we could switch between the two channels using this, and he would plug into channel A, and he would set his volume to his guitar, and that would be on channel B, and I would set my volume to my guitar, and then we were able to use the same amp, and that was one less setting that we had to adjust. But what's cool about the Mark II version as well is it has this parametric EQ, which is really, really useful for when you have like a guitar that sounds perfect, maybe it has a little bit too much like low mids, or maybe it's a little sharp. You can go in with the frequencies and dial in that frequency, and you can notch it down. I've used this knob so much that the little silver part fell off. And it has built-in reverb, which fortunately I don't use enough. But yeah, this is my Twinsies zone. So this next song, Lost at Sea, demonstrates how I have to do a lot of switching. To help me with some of that switching, I put some samples on this keyboard to play some of the chords, so I would have an opportunity to, with my right hand, just mute my guitar and keep it from like humming and stuff, and with my left hand just play these chords. And then on my guitar, I'm using the Outta and a little bit of the overdrive to get that, kind of like Masayoshi Takanaka type of envelope lead that I was talking about. So I've always been a big fan of learning from the greats. One of those greats is Hiroshi Sato, a Japanese composer that wrote this great song called Say Goodbye. And I've always wanted to learn how they got those sounds and kind of play a little bit more like those 70s and 80s like Japanese keyboardists. And the best way to do that is just listen to it and try to figure out how those sounds were made and kind of figure out the chords to kind of play like them. And it was such a fun project that as a band, we learned how to play it, did a fun little video that we posted online, and now we started playing it live. And I had to recreate those sounds with this keyboard. And I used the OB6 with my bass sound, added a little bit of top end, used the monophonic mode, and it sounds something like this. And then added the wheel range to be 3 semitones to do the bends for the song. And use the thing that I talked about earlier, the aftertouch, to do these